Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into the absolute core, foundational conflict of sociology. This is a debate that has literally shaped the discipline since day one. So here's the big question. Are sociologists just neutral note-takers passively observing the world, or are they actually meant to be active architects of a brand new society? It's this massive, fascinating tug-of-war between playing the impartial scientist and stepping up as a catalyst for real change.
Here's our roadmap for this debate. 1. The core sociological debate. 2. Sociology as social action. 3. The case for objectivity. 4. Accidental activism. And finally, 5. To interpret or transform. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The core sociological debate. Note-takers versus architects.
So, heading straight back to the origins of the discipline, this one single question basically splits the entire field down the middle. On one side, we've got the activists holding a megaphone, right? They argue that sociology is inherently political because it's uncovering inequality and challenging dominant ideologies. But then, on the exact opposite side, you have the scientists peering through a microscope. They insist sociology has to remain purely objective and descriptive. Otherwise, well, it just loses its scientific credibility entirely.
To really wrap our heads around the change it camp, we have to look at this incredibly famous quote from Karl Marx. It perfectly sets the stakes here. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. Marxist sociology provides the absolute strongest foundation for the idea that sociology's true purpose is transformation. Marx firmly believed that social science shouldn't just be some neutral description. In an era where academics were staying safely tucked away in their ivory towers, Marx was out there insisting it had to be a call to action to reveal the exploitative nature of capitalism and literally build a revolutionary consciousness.
Moving on to Section 2, Sociology as Social Action, the Change It Camp.
Building on that foundation Marx laid down, later neo-Marxists, like Antonio Gramsci, completely doubled down on the idea that sociology and political struggle are totally inseparable. Gramsci argued that sociologists have to challenge this concept of hegemony. Basically, hegemony refers to the subtle, kind of invisible forms of consent that keep unequal economic and cultural systems locked in place. It's not just about brute force, it's about how the ruling class maintains power through everyday cultural institutions. So for theorists in this camp, dragging hegemony out into the light is the very first step to waking up that revolutionary consciousness.
And feminist sociology does something really similar, placing transformation right at the core of the work. Anne Oakley came up with this brilliant term maelstream. She used it to critique traditional sociology for completely ignoring women's experiences and, just blindly reproducing patriarchal assumptions. Feminist research has this explicit, undeniable intention to expose gender inequality and then actually reform those structures. And honestly, it works. When you look at the success of feminist research in shaping real-world policies, stuff like domestic violence protections, reproductive rights, and workplace equality, it shows exactly how sociological insight can be a direct driver of massive social change.
Then we've got the interactionists and labeling theorists. Thinkers like Howard Becker make a totally active commitment to revealing injustice by, as he famously phrased it, taking the side of the underdog. They are all about giving a voice to marginalized groups who usually just get completely silenced by the system. Labeling theory is fascinating because it shows how deviance isn't necessarily something inherent in a person, but it's actually produced by the social reactions of powerful agencies. We're talking police, schools, the courts. By exposing how that sausage gets made, interactionist sociology provides this huge actionable foundation for reforming institutions like criminal justice and education.
All right, Section 3, the case for objectivity, the observe it camp.
Okay, prepare for a total 180 here. We were just talking about interactionists advocating for the marginalized, right? Well, in stark, absolute contrast, positivist sociologists demand strict, detached scientific neutrality. For them, if sociologists starts acting like an activist group, it completely throws its scientific legitimacy right out the window. Positivists like Auguste Comte and Emile Durkheim were completely adamant that the goal is purely to understand and predict society. They wanted to report on facts the exact same way a natural scientist reports on biology or chemistry. Durkheim was obsessed with uncovering neutral social facts. Take his really famous study of suicide. Now, suicide seems like this entirely individual, deeply psychological act, right? Well, Durkheim used data to prove it was actually driven by measurable external social forces. He was trying to show that sociology could study incredibly personal, tragic human behaviors with the exact same cold objectivity as any natural science. From this viewpoint, you study society to understand it, absolutely not to intervene in it. Now, Max Weber had a slightly more nuanced take, but he still backed the absolute need for what he called value freedom.
Basically, you've got to protect your credibility. He warned that mixing your political goals with academic work was playing with fire. But Weber was also pretty realistic. He admitted, a researcher's values are inevitably going to dictate what they choose to study in the very first place. You study what you care about, obviously. And he also fully recognized that once your sociological knowledge is out there in the world, it is absolutely going to influence public debate, whether you want it to or not.
Which brings us to Section 4, Accidental Activism, the blur between observation and action.
So this is the really crucial point. Even the most supposedly neutral research doesn't just sit quietly on a shelf in some academic vacuum. It inevitably shapes policy. Look at this. Functionalist ideas, which were just focused on observing social cohesion, ended up deeply influencing major educational reforms. Or take research from the New Right, which focused heavily on market forces, that strongly informed welfare and family policies in the late 20th century. And naturally, feminism and Marxism have directly contributed to sweeping legislation on equality and labor rights. The takeaway here is that even when sociologists don't explicitly set out to change society, their work inherently becomes the raw material for political decision-making.
But wait, just as we seem to be tying this all up with a nice little bow, the postmodernists abruptly crash the party. Thinkers like Jean-François Lyotard step in and argue that society is actually way too fragmented now for any kind of universal solution to work. He famously made the claim that there are simply no grand narratives left.
This postmodern critique completely shatters the big transformative ambitions of theories like Marxism and feminism. Postmodernists are basically saying, look, you can't direct large-scale social change anymore because society is just too individualized. But while Lyotard's view does a great job highlighting modern fragmentation, it gets a massive pushback. Critics argue, actually, wait a second, this perspective just leads to total political passivity. If sociology just throws its hands up and retreats from trying to create social change, it runs the huge risk of ignoring very real, persistent structural inequalities, making the entire field totally irrelevant to the actual daily struggles of everyday communities.
Section 5. To interpret or transform. The inevitable impact. So, as we resolve this whole debate, a pretty clear pattern emerges. Regardless of a researcher's original intent to be this perfectly neutral observer, sociology just inherently drives social transformation. By its very nature, the discipline reveals injustice, it challenges dominant ideologies, and it empowers marginalized groups. Sociology's greatest hits aren't just dry, descriptive textbooks. They're the exposure of institutional labeling, the takedown of patriarchy, and the actual guiding of real-world political decision-making.
The most convincing conclusion we can draw from all of this source material is simply this. By uncovering the hidden social forces at play, sociologists hand over the tools that individuals and institutions need to create a more equal society. They literally become accidental architects of a more just world. And honestly, viewed in that light, Marx's bold claim that the entire point is to change the world, well, it remains incredibly compelling today.
Which leaves us with one final profound thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Think about it. If the simple act of analyzing the world inevitably changes it, what part of your everyday world is going to change simply because you choose to observe it a little more closely today? Thanks so much for exploring this incredible debate with me, and definitely keep questioning the world around you.